يكن له كفوا أحد. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولله ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء قدير. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. ولله ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء قدير. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات السماوات والأرض ربنا ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
صلوات محمدي. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والسماء والطارق وما أدراك ما الطارق. النجم الثاقب إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ. فلينظر الإنسان مما خلق. خلق من ماء دافق يخرج من بين الصلب والترائب. إنه على رجعه لقادر. إنه على رجعه لقادر. يوم تبلى السرائر فما له من قوة ولا ناصر. والسماء ذات الرجع والأرض ذات الصدع. إنه لقول رسول كريم. والسماء ذات الرجع والأرض ذات الصدع. إنه لقول فصل وما هو بالحزن إنهم يكيدون كيدا وأكيد كيدا فمهل الكافرين أمهلهم رويدا صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات محمد
صلوات. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. من جاء بالحسنة فله عشر أمثالها ومن جاء بالسيئة فلا يجزى إلا مثلها وهم لا يظلمون. قل إنني هداني ربي إلى صراط مستقيم دينا قيما ملة إبراهيم حنيفا وما كان من المشركين. قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له لا شريك له لا شريك له لا شريك له وبذلك أمرت وأنا أول المسلمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
من مچه هستم خدا را می پرستم خدای پاک و دانا مهربان و توانا پیامبرم محمد که با او آن آمانند دین را به ما رسانده او ما را خوانده دختر او زهرا بود فاطمه کبرا بود فدای دین شد جان است لعنت به دشمنانش در روز دیگری مانان نون شدمید علی مومنین است امام اولین است امام دوم ما بخشنده بود و تنها نام ایشان حسن بود صبور رو سخن کن صبور رو سخن کن حسین که شاهدین است امام دومینش شهید کربلا شد تربت با شفا شد تربت با شفا شد وقتی کردم میخورم برو زدم میکنم برو زدم میکنم برو زدم میکنم چارم امام سجاد به ما را دایاها از دکنان دواها پرمانیمون تو سیبا پرمانیمون تو سیبا صلوات.
Please recite a loud salawat for Sister Tina. Please recite another salawat for all the brothers who recited Quran. Brother Abul Fazl, Brother Ali, and our dear other brother, Brother Jawad. Please recite a loud salawat. Let's welcome Agha Sahib for a manqabat. Sheikh is on the way. He will be here in a few minutes, inshallah. We'll listen to the manqabat, and then after that we'll have lecture.
برای سلامتی خودتان، خانواده‌تان، فرج در ظهور آقای امام الزمان صلوات. اللهم صل علی محمد و آل محمد و عجل فرجهم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. یا رحمان یا رحیم. یا رب ذکرم بر من درویش نگر، بر حال من خسته دلریش نگر، هرچندیم لایق بخشایش تو، بر من نگر، بر کرم خویش نگر. اشرف انبیا رسول الله، این چنین گفت در گو بیگا، زینو مجالسکم به مدیح علی ولی الله. بجز از علی نباشد به جهان گره گشایی، طلب مدد از او کن چو رسد غم و بلایی، چو بکار خیشمانی در رحمت علی زن که جزو به زخم دلها ننهد کسی دوایی ز ولای او بزندم که رها شوی ز ارغن سر کوی او مکان کن بنگر که در کجایی بشناختم خدا را چو شناختم علی را به خدا نبرده ای پای اگر از علی جدایی علی ہے حقیقت حق علی ای ولی مطلق تو جمال کبریایی تو حقیقت خدایی نظری ز لطف و رحمت به من شکست دل کن تو که یار دردمندی تو که یار بی نوایی اما عمرم چو شهری در رحمت علی زن که بجز علی نباشد به جهان گره گشایی صلوات محمد و آل محمد گویا عزای حضرت موسی بن جعفر است امروز قلب عالم امکان پر آذر است لرزان ز تاب ماتم و غم عرش اکبر است زهرا به باغ خلد بود نوحگر و بلی گویا عزای حضرت موسی بن جعفر است تنها نه قلب عالم امکان بود ملول پیوست عالم از غم داغش در آذر است شاهی که ممکنات تو فیل وجود اوست ماهی که گوشه ز رخش مهر انور است گویا عزای حضرت موسی بن جعفر است قایم مقام ختم رسول قایم مقام ختم رسول هادی سبال رکن هدا شهید و سرا نور داور است از کینه و عداوت هارون بران جناب چشم رضا خدیو خراسان ز خون تر است گویا عزای حضرت موسی بن جعفر است مسموم گشت و گوشه زندان سپرد جان زین غصه داغ بر دل ما تا به محشر است او گرچه جان سپرد به زندان غریب وار، خود نیست خونجگر ز غم جد اطهر است. گویا عزای حضرت موسی بن جعفر است. مسموم گشت موسی جعفر، مسموم گشت موسی جعفر ز زهر کین، هم با حسین کشته شمشیر و خنجر است. موسی شهید گشت ولی بی کفن نماند، سیفی حسین بی کفن و غسل و بی سر است. گویا عزای حضرت موسی بن جعفر است. دریاب خستگان غمت راز حادثات، ای دستگیر شوگدا پیر و جوان یا علی مدد. ورد ما این است دایم الاوقات که به زهرا گلزار محمد بلند صلوات.
Please recite another salawat for our dear brother Sayyid Mujtaba Mahdawi. برنامه‌های بعدی انشاءالله تا قبل از رمضان که داریم، برنامه بعدی هفته آینده تاریخ اول فبروری است. ولادت امام حسین علیه السلام، امام سجاد علیه السلام و حضرت باب الهوایج ابوالفضل عباس. انشاءالله هفته آینده روز شنبه پروگرام داریم. برنامه بعدی نیمه شعبان است، تاریخ 15 فبروری، ولادت با سعادت حضرت صاحب العصر و زمان انشاءالله. و همچنان تورنمنت والیبال قسمی که قبلا اعلان شد تاریخ 7 فبروری برای خواهران و برادران در نظر گرفته شده. از خواهران وقتش جداست که خواهران بتانن آزادانه به تورنمنت اشتراک کنن. تاریخ 7 فبروری جمعه شب. قسمی که در گروپ واتساپ اعلان شد برای ماه رمضان همکاری و کمک شما ضرورت است در بخش‌های از مرکز اسلامی زهرا، مثل توزیع غذا، آماده سازی افطار، پاکاری مسجد. کسایی که علاقمند هستند، وقت دارن و میخواین که از این ثواب بهره مند شوند، برادر عزیز میتونن همراه برادر محترم و جزیم حسینی و خواهران عزیز میتونن با خواهر ما وفا احمد و تماس شوند و ثبت نام کنن. انشاءالله که خداوند اجر و ثواب عظیم نصیبتان بگرداند. A couple of announcements. Next week, inshallah, February 1st, we will celebrate the wilada of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, Imam Sajjad, and Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam. So it will be next week, February 1st, Saturday. The next program will be February 15th. It will be also a Saturday, wilada of Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman alayhi salam, Nime Shaban. As announced, we'll have volleyball tournament on February 7th for brothers and sisters. It will be a Friday night. So we would encourage everybody, sisters and brothers, to sign up because we have limited spots. As we announced in the WhatsApp group, volunteers are needed for Ramadan, inshallah. Most likely, Ramadan will be on March 1st. So if you would like to volunteer, we need volunteers for prepping the food, serving the food, cleaning the masjid. So brothers, you can contact Brother Haji Azim. Sisters, please contact Sister Wafa Ahmad, and you will sign up. You will be assigned to specific tasks, inshallah. If you can't do it for the whole month, you can let them about the dates that you're available, and then you will be assigned to specific tasks. Also, for all sick, especially those who requested for du'as and those who are in critical conditions, they requested salawat, so please recite a loud salawat for all the sick. Also, please recite a salawat for the marhumin of a sponsor of tonight's program and the well-being of the families of these sponsors of tonight's program. Please recite a loud salawat. We're extremely honored that we have our dear respected scholar, Sheikh Bilal Hussain, with us tonight. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Sheikh Bilal Hussain to the member with a loud salawat.
رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد صلى على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat is condolences to the master of our time, Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بذكرنا المسائب آل Muhammad. May Allah continue to increase in our reward for commemorating the difficulties of Ahlul Bayt. This day coincides with the commemoration of the 25th of the month of Rajab, which is known as the Shahadat of our 7th Imam. Tonight our discussion will revolve around discussing the biography of this Imam and stopping at points to discuss some of the important lessons that we have from the life of this Imam. The life of this Imam is often believed to have started on the 7th of Rajab. However, the more significant dates point that his birth was actually in the month of Dhul-Hijjah. His life consists of a period of 55 years, 20 years that were spent under his father, and 35 years that were spent as the Imam of the time. When we look at the life of this Imam, the discussion about his birth, of whether it was the 7th of Safar or if it was in the month of Dhul-Hijjah, the discussion points to that it is more likely to be in the month of Dhul-Hijjah than in the month of Safar. Why? Because famously, our 6th Imam was on his way back from Hajj, from Mecca to the city of Medina, when this Imam was born. Therefore, it would make sense that after the days of Hajj is when the Imam was proceeding, and in the middle of this month of Dhul-Hijjah is around the time where, or the later part of the month of Dhul-Hijjah is the time where the Imam was born in a place called Abwa. Abwa was one of the passage points between the city of Mecca and Medina, and it's narrated that the mother of our 7th Imam who had gone to Hajj with Imam as-Sadiq, her name was Humayda or Hamida. Humayda was with the Imam in this experience of Hajj, and on her way back from this Hajj is where she said that I am feeling the pains of delivery, and that they stopped in this place for the birth. Sheikh Al-Kulayni narrates that in this return process, the companions are the ones who gave us the narration of the birth of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, and they discussed and they said that Imam Musa ibn Ja'far was born at such a time that we had gathered with Imam Sadiq to eat, and he asked about his wife and heard that she was not well, and he left us for her company. After some time, when Imam Sadiq returned, we asked him, "Ha Bashir, what happened?" And he says, "Alhamdulillah, Allah has blessed us with a son." And Hamida was describing to me the attributes of this child that I had already known about him. In a very lengthy hadith, one of the points that Imam Sadiq points to in this discussion, he explains and he says, what were these attributes that are unique to an imam at the moment of birth? And from amongst them, two that he mentions is that when an imam is born, that the first thing that he does is he places his hands upon the earth and he looks up to the heavens. And Imam Sadiq explains that the placing of an imam, his hands on the earth, is an explanation to say that Allah has endowed him with all of the knowledge that he has revealed to all of the anbiya, and that he is exclaiming and announcing that I am the possessor of that knowledge, and he looks to the heavens because he hears the caller from the heavens, the malaika from the heavens, calling to him in communication and congratulating him of his high status. In this way, Imam Sadiq, from the birth of Imam Al-Kadhim, is announcing that Imam Al-Kadhim is not like other children. One of the unique attributes of this Imam is his mother, Humayda, or Hamida. This Imam is the first of the A'immah alayhimus salam whose mother was what we call Walad. Walad refers to that lady who is what the Quran describes as ma malakat aymanuhum, what is possessed by the right hand. What we see from the 7th Imam all the way until the 12th Imam, every single one of the mothers of the A'immah alayhimus salam are Walad. Every single one. Prior to this, all of the Imams, when we look at them, their mothers have a different lineage. After Sayyidah Zahra, then there is, for example, Shahzanan, who is the mother of Imam Zain al-Abidin. The wife of Imam al-Baqir, or the wife of Imam Zain al-Abidin, is the daughter of Imam Hassan, who is Fatima bint al-Hassan, or Sharifa bint al-Hassan, as she is also known. And then the mother of our 6th Imam is known as Farwa, who is the granddaughter from one side of the first Khalifa, and from the other side, that it is Imam Baqir, who is the child of Imam Zain al-Abidin and Imam Ali. To the extent where, when it came to the life of Imam Sadiq, they would actually discuss and say that Imam Sadiq is the one who has the connection to the Khulafa from one side and the connection to Amir al-Mu'mineen from the other side. But from the 7th Imam forward, all of the mothers are known as Walad. Now there's a few interesting points to pay attention to in this situation, that why did Allah designate that all of the mothers of the A'immah alayhimus salam would be from not from the noble families, would be from those places, from foreign lands and different locations, and would be those that were taken in the process of being an amma, being a servant in the house, and then they would be the mother of the Imam. To understand this, we can take a look at the verse that we began our discussion with, which is in Surah Hujurat, and it's a very famous and well-known verse in which Allah says, Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind, certainly we have created you, min dhakarin wa untha, from men and women, and families, and clans, and tribes, lita'arafu, so that you can know one another. The significance of Allah making this statement points to the idea that society was made into colors and shapes and sizes and nationalities and clans and families, so that there would be some way for us to connect and develop a personality and identity of who we're attached to and who's associated with us. Allah gives the explanation of why He's explaining this in the next part of this verse, where He says, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. That certainly the only ones who are superior to others, who have superiority with Allah, akramakum indallah, who have status and proximity to Allah, atqakum, the pious amongst you. What had happened as a tradition amongst all of the Arab, that they believed that they possessed a superiority. In the time of our Prophet, it was the superiority over the Quraysh, over all of the others. And as time went on and this empire of Islam expanded, they believed in the superiority over the Arab, over the Ajam, over the foreigner, of the Persian, over the non-Persian, over everybody else. The Arab was superior. To the extent where the culture amongst the Arabs at that point in time was that they would marry twice at least. One would be to have children and it had to be from an Arab family, and the other one would be to make them happy or from any other nation that they chose to, they would marry from, but they would not have children. And if they found someone who married from someone who's non-Arab, they would actually chastise them and try to separate that relationship. To break this racial superiority, Allah played a particular role in structuring the families of the Ahlul Bayt, that the mothers of the Ahlul Bayt and the Aimma alayhimus salam would not be from amongst the Arab families and would be from amongst the foreign families. And the intention of this was to show that you who feel you have some level of superiority, the one who you have to submit to over you, his family is the one that comes from different cultures and brings them together. This attribute is one of the most important attributes, that Allah doesn't do this with one Imam. He does this with 6 of the Imams. He gives them patronage and mothers from outside of the Arab tradition, to show that don't be proud of your lineage, but rather focus on your character. That if the character is good, then the mother can be from any nation. If she is ma'suma, if she is innocent, if she is pure, if she keeps herself pure, she is worthy of being the mother of the Imam. وَلَوْ لَيْسَ كَانَتْ مِنَ الْعَرَبِ, even though she's not from amongst the Arab nations. This was an important tradition that was established to change and bring change into society and establish society till today. Where even today, when we look to, for example, where should marriage be taken from, it's not on the basis of that, oh, this culture is better than that culture. No, the appropriateness is to look at what's called quf. That this quf refers to the spiritual equality that exists between a husband and wife. The mistake we make is that sometimes we take half of the lesson, not the other half. And we're spending a bit of time on this, but it's worth pointing this out. Oh, say, it's no problem. The Aimma alayhimus salam, their mothers were not from the Arabs, so therefore it's no problem if I don't marry from amongst my culture. Yes. But the Aimma alayhimus salam paid attention to quf, that there was spiritual equality, that it was someone who was a good partner to them, that was then their spouse that they would marry to. One of the things that we've stopped paying attention to is that the spiritual equality. Is this person someone who will work with me and who understands what my faith is and what my ideology is and what I need to achieve in my life? Is this going to be my partner who helps me get into heaven? Or is it someone who's going to distract me from my purpose? This lesson that begins from the 7th Imam, and it's significant to pay attention to, is paying attention to the process that the selection of a spouse, make sure that spirituality is one of the fundamentals that you focus on. Culture is elsewhere. It's a good thing. Sometimes it helps us find our quf, which is why culture is good. But the most important aspect is to make sure that the person has the piety that we want, the piety that helps us grow and helps us flourish in our faith and our religion. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first 20 years of the life of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far are not well discussed. There's not many ahadith that we have from the Imam in this time. There's not much that is known to us about these 20 years. The reason for that is at the age of 4 is when the Khilafat of the Banu Umayyah fell and the Khilafat of the Banu Abbas began. The Banu Abbas, who had taken the Khilafat away from the Banu Umayyah, did it on the basis that we will seek revenge for the killers of Imam Hussain, and that we are closer to the Prophet than the Banu Umayyah. That the Banu Umayyah have shown they are the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt, and that we, the Banu Abbas, are from the Prophet's family, we are close to him. The consequence of this was that as soon as the Banu Abbas took this power and authority in their name, they realized that the children of Sayyidah Zahra are closer to the Prophet than they are. So what they did was they began the process of persecuting the children of Sayyidah Zahra. Because as long as the Banu Fatima were present, the Banu Abbas had no right to authority, or had less right to authority. As because of this then, the Ahlul Bayt had to hide the lineage and the patronage of where Imamat would go. So which is why we see that the first 20 years of the life of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far are not well discussed. There isn't much. There are a few hadith that we possess that talk to us about the significance of the contribution of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far even in this phase. You guys want to hear a story? You okay? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One of the stories that we possess about the life of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far under his father, Imam Sadiq, is given to us by Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa says, I went once to see Imam Sadiq and he wasn't there. But I had been pondering a question, so the young man who was maybe 13, 14 years of age who came to the door to let me in, I decided to ask him my question, because he's from the house of Imam Sadiq, so maybe he knows something. So he says, as I came to the house and I realized Imam Sadiq isn't there, this young man, I asked him, I said, let me ask you a question. When a man commits a sin, who causes him to commit that sin? And he says, this young man of 13 years replied to me, he says, oh, Aba Hanifa, the idea of who commits a sin can have one of three meanings. The first meaning is that when a man commits a sin, Allah makes him commit a sin. And he says this meaning is wrong. Because if Allah makes him commit the sin, then Allah has no right to punish him. Because Allah made him do it. So he says then the day of judgment that Allah promises and heaven and hell that Allah promises is all a lie. Because Allah made you do it, you had no choice. Why should you be punished? Why should you be rewarded? So he says this meaning is wrong. Abu Hanifa says, then this young man said to me, the second possible interpretation is that man and God together commit the sin. That there is a partnership, that Allah pushes him and the man agrees and they perform this action together. Again, he says that this young man turned to me and he said, that's not possible either. Why? Because the will of Allah would be stronger than the will of man. And if the will of Allah is stronger than the will of man, then the stronger of the two is the one that should be punished, not the weaker of the two. And again, we would come into a problem that there's no benefit of the Day of Judgment. He says, which leaves us with the third option, which is to say that a man freely commits a sin of his own right and no one forces him to commit that sin. This is the most logical conclusion because this would justify the existence of a Day of Judgment where a person can be rewarded for avoiding the sin and can be punished for causing the sin. Abu Hanifa says this young man completely answered my question in a way that there could be no doubt. This question, by the way, is one of the fundamental questions that was actually being debated amongst the Muslimin for a period of time. Remember that after the events of Karbala is when the Banu Umayyah raised the flag and said, we didn't kill Imam Hussain, Allah made us do it. They presented the argument that they said, no, Allah wanted him to die. We just became the wasila. To try and make themselves a bari dhimma, free of responsibility for the murder of Imam Hussain. And therefore amongst humanity was this question going on amongst society. That is it really my fault when I do something wrong? But if Allah is Jabbar, Allah is the one who is Alim, who is all-knowing, and Allah is the one with power, then isn't Allah the one who makes me commit this sin? And this debate had been ongoing amongst society, and here Imam Al-Kadhim, in a very simple, short explanation, solved the issue and answered the question in such a way that it firmed the aqeedah and the philosophy of our faith that yes, Allah may be omniscient, but He doesn't force us to sin. He doesn't force us to do good. Why? Because if He did that, then we wouldn't deserve a reward or a punishment. In this way we see that though there are very few instances of communication with Imam Al-Kadhim before the start of his imamat, there are very functional and important conversations that happen. At the age of 20, at the Shahadat of Imam Sadiq, there is an interesting event that takes place that demonstrates to us why Imam Sadiq didn't talk about Imam Al-Kadhim very much. Imam Al-Kadhim was introduced, but to very few people. One of the introductions that Imam Sadiq would make, because he couldn't talk about it openly, is that when people would come and ask, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, oh Imam Sadiq, who will be the Imam after you? Imam Sadiq would point to his son, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, and say, the armor of Rasulullah has fit him perfectly. Those who understood the philosophy and the concept of Islam would listen to this and say, we understand, thank you very much, and leave. And everybody else would listen to this and say, what do you mean by this? What does that have to do with anything? I asked you, who's the Imam? You're telling me about the armor of the Prophet. The significance of that statement was that there are certain signs that only an Imam can fulfill. And one of those signs is that how do you recognize an Imam? And it's important for us to pay attention to this. Why? Because someday when we meet our Imam, inshallah, yeah, when we meet our Imam, inshallah, you guys have to be awake, man. If you're going to sleep, I can't do this. I can't do this alone. You need to know, how do I recognize the Imam? And there are certain signs that the Imam possesses that no one else possesses. And one of those signs that are unique to the Imam is that he wears the armor of Rasulullah. He possesses all of the tabarrukat of the Anbiya, the shirt of Yusuf, the staff of Musa. All of these will be with the Imam. But one of them that he'll possess is the armor of Rasulullah. And the only person who can wear that armor is the Imam of the time. And that the way that you recognize that who is the Imam is that he wears that armor and it fits him as if it's made for him, and no one else can wear it like that. And which is why when Imam Sadiq couldn't tell people openly who is the Imam, he would describe and say that this son of mine has worn the armor and it fit him. And those who understood the position of Ahlul Bayt could recognize this. Now you guys okay? Everybody's good? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One of the interesting points is that you would imagine that what this means is that all of the Imams look exactly the same. And they're built exactly the same. And they all have the exact same body type. It's not true. As a matter of fact, this is a mu'jiza, a unique mu'jiza. It's a miracle that the Imam can wear the armor and it's as if it fits him. Each of the Imams had different physical appearances and had different body types as well too, which were unique to them. Which is why even in the description of Imam Ali, one of the descriptions of Imam Ali is that he was called Al-Anza al-Batin. Al-Anza al-Batin is that person who is missing his hair, whose hair has fallen out, is Anza, and Batin, the one who has a stomach, a protruding stomach. And some of the believers, they imagine and they say that this description of him was made by the Banu Umayyah because the Banu Umayyah tried to discredit and reduce the status of Imam Ali excessively, where they took all of his attributes and they tried to take them all away from him. But that doesn't necessarily, we see it in our poetry as well too, in the description of Imam Ali, and that's where we misunderstand that what does this mean? The concept of batin can also mean that, for example, that Imam Ali was incredibly strong. Today if we take a look at a strong man, we see that he's not built with a flat stomach, his muscles protrude out. And then one of the descriptions of Imam Ali is that he was incredibly physically strong. Where they describe and they say that when you looked at Ali ibn Abi Talib, you couldn't tell his forearm was as thick as his bicep. So if we put this together, it's physically possible that Imam Ali had, from the muscular structure he possessed, had a physical presence of a stomach. And Anza, one of the explanations is to say that where he was struck by Amr ibn Abd Wud, caused the hair to fall out on his head from the wound that he had received. And as a consequence of that, he had no hair on the top of his head. So it's not necessary that these attributes were an insult. The same way when we see the description of our fifth Imam, he was considered to be heavy set. And this isn't an insult to him. It's a different physical type that exists within humanity, and there's nothing wrong with that. Which is why the description of the armor fitting the Imam is not to say they all looked like Rasulullah. The significance is not the physical appearance. And which is why it would be a mu'jiza and a miracle that whatever the Imam's physical appearance was, when he would touch the armor of Rasulullah, it was as if it was made for him. And that's what would make it something special, to indicate this was the attribute of the Imam, that this is how you recognize the Imam. But at the age of 20, when Imam Sadiq dies, the danger to the life of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far is such that Imam Ja'far Sadiq left a will that we have not seen by any other Imam. When Imam Sadiq dies, Mansur sends a letter to the governor of Medina. And he says, Governor of Medina, whoever Ja'far Sadiq has appointed as a successor, kill him, end the story of these Imams. In knowledge of this, Imam Sadiq left a will where he appointed 5 successors. 5 people who would be the followers or who would be the Imam after him. And which is why the governor of Medina writes back to Mansur and says, Mansur, I can't execute your command. Mansur says, why can't you do what I told you to? The governor of Medina says, because the 5 people who Imam Sadiq says are his successor are you and me. And then Abdullah al-Aftah, Musa al-Kadhim, and Humaydah. And the governor of Medina says, if I execute one of these, I have to execute the other 4. If I have to execute the other 4, I have to be executed, you have to be executed. So meaning the danger to the life of the Imam was so great that it could not even be disclosed to the public who was going to be the successor of Imam Sadiq. Now those who were believers, the same way they could understand from the armor who was the next Imam, they could understand from this wasiyah who was the next Imam. When we look at the 5 names that the Imam leaves, Mansur the Khalifa is the one who killed his father, so it can't be Mansur. We look at the governor of Medina who was ready to kill the Imam, can't be the governor. That leaves 3 people. The mother, Hamidah, it can't be Hamidah because it can't be a woman. And then that leaves 2 sons of Imam Sadiq. It leaves Abdullah, who was the oldest son, and it leaves Imam Musa al-Kadhim. Now, there were 2 ways of answering this, of which son do we pick. One of the answers of which son do we pick was that if it was the older son, there was no need to mention the younger son. And if the Imam is mentioning the younger son, then that's the one that we go with. Others knew a different way of understanding who the Imam would be. And that was on the basis of Abdullah's description as Abdullah al-Aftah. Al-Aftah is the one with a club foot or a handicap in his foot. And one of the attributes of an Imam is that he is perfect in all aspects, physical, mental, spiritual, and character. So therefore, someone who possesses a physical disability can't be the Imam because the Imam has to be perfect in all attributes. And they came to the conclusion immediately that then the Imamate goes to Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. But not everybody understood this. Some people did follow Abdullah al-Aftah and they became known as al-Fatahiyya. And this became a sect that broke off after Imam Sadiq. The establishment of a number of sects happens in the life of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, which should be an explanation to tell you of how dangerous it was to follow the path of Ahlul Bayt in the life of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. That was a very difficult thing and very dangerous. And this is why we take a look and we see that the imamate of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far lasted for a period of 35 years, and there were 4 khulafa in that time period, and each of them was more dangerous than the last to the cause of Islam. And we'll give a description of the 4 of these. You guys are still with me? You're awake? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sallu ala Muhammad. These 4 khulafa, Mansur, Mahdi, Hadi, and Harun. Each of them caused trouble for the Imam in a way that was unlike the other and which was extreme. Harun, we know, was the killer of the father of Imam Musa Al-Kadhim. Mansur was the killer of the father of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far and was someone who wanted to find and execute the Imam at any cost, and he made it difficult. And Imam Musa Al-Kadhim survived for 10 years under him. Then Mansur died. Mansur was such a butcher that when he dies, he left in his will, he says, I have 2 trunks that are kept in my belongings. I want no one to open them until after I die. When he dies and they open these trunks, they found the heads of the children of Sayyidah Zahra in these cases that he had been saving as he would kill off the children of Bibi Fatima. And he was that kind of a butcher towards the Imam and the followers and the children of Bibi Fatima. The second Khalifa was known as Mahdi. Mahdi's Khilafat lasted for a period of 11 years. Mahdi was probably one of the most vile individuals that was out there, who made it haram, he made it disallowed to talk about ilmul kalam, or the philosophy of faith. If you ever discuss the principles of Tawheed, Adalat, Nabuwat, Imamat, Ma'ad, you are immediately wajib qatl. To the extent where Imam Musa ibn Ja'far in these 11 years forbade the Shia from talking about their faith and their identity. Because as soon as you would do it, he would kill you. Mahdi is also the one who brought in the Greco-Roman philosophy into the Arabic language. One of the interesting things to notice is this 35-year period that we're talking about of the Imamate of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. If you take a look at it in popular history, it coincides with the peak, the ufuq of the Abbasid Khilafat and the Islamic empire that existed in the world. That this empire had expanded all the way from Spain on one side to China on the other side. Yet when we discuss this time period, we're not talking about the attribute of how great the empire was. Because as great as they made the empire on the outside, that's how dangerous and miserable they made it for the lovers of Ahlul Bayt inside. One of the reasons for the introduction of Dar al-Hikmah that happens under Harun, one of the reasons for the introduction of this Greco-Roman philosophy was exactly the reason to keep people away from the Ahlul Bayt. So they would bring in these Roman philosophers, Socrates, Greek philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, so that people would talk about them, but not talk about the Ahlul Bayt and the teachings of Ahlul Bayt. Mahdi's dawr is the first time that Imam Musa ibn Ja'far was sent to prison for at least a period of 1 year, where he was put through very great difficulties and separated from his family. And Mahdi killed many of the followers of Ahlul Bayt. At the end of his 11 years, the next Khalifa was Hadi, whose Khilafat lasted for only 1 year. But this 1 year of Hadi was again very bad. One of the events that takes place in history is called Waqiyat al-Fakh. Waqiyat al-Fakh, the Ahlul Bayt would describe the worst day after the event of Karbala on our family, the Ahlul Bayt, was the event of Fakh that took place. One of the grandsons of Imam Hassan, who was known as Hussain ibn Ali, Hussain ibn Ali rose the flag of revolution against Al-Hadi and the Banu Abbas. and gathered a bunch of the children of Bibi Fatima and many of their supporters outside of Mecca, outside of Medina, and raised the revolution against the Khalifa. Hadi so violently and brutally put it down and killed everyone that he could, to the extent where the Ahlul Bayt say, we never lost more of our family after Karbala than this day. And this day was a great difficulty on us. And you can read about Waqiyat al-Fakh, that talks about the event of Fakh and the killing of the children of Sayyidah Zahra in this uprising. Imam Musa ibn Ja'far did not participate in this uprising because of his knowledge of what was the conclusion of this and the need to preserve the message of Islam so that it would continue. Hadi's Khilafat lasts for about 11 months and then he's killed. Some of the explanations, not unlike what happened to Mal'un Yazid, is that Mal'un Yazid, 3 years of disgrace he performed and then he was killed and he was gone. In the same concept as Hadi, what he performed was so evil and so bad that his Khilafat did not last more than a year. And that after this began the Khilafat of Harun. And Harun's Khilafat coincides for a period of 13 years with the life of 13 or 14 years with the life of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. And that these 13 years or 14 years were the most difficult years on Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. To the extent where some of the discussions say that almost the entirety of the Khilafat of Harun, Imam Musa al-Kadhim is put into prison. The authentic information that we find is that during this time period, he spends a great amount of time in prison, whether that's a period of the final 4 years of his life or even more than that. Harun's interest in oppressing Imam Musa ibn Ja'far was extreme. One of the goals that Harun had was to prove to the world that there's no difference between us and the children of Bibi Fatima. We are all cousins. And we have the same status in the eyes of Allah and we have the same status in the eyes of Islam. And he kept trying to show there's no difference. Me and Musa ibn Ja'far are the same. And every time when this would be disproven, he would become more and more frustrated and more ready to spill the blood of the Imam. There are descriptions that describe and say that at times he would call the Imam with the intention to kill him and Allah would preserve the life of the Imam. One of these instances that talks about why Harun had such a problem was that it describes and says that when Harun went to Medina and went to the grave of Rasulullah, he stood by the grave of Rasulullah and he said, Assalamu alayka ya am. My salam to you, O my dear uncle. And Imam Musa al-Kadhim comes at the same time and he says, Assalamu alayka ya abata. Imam Musa al-Kadhim comes and he says, my salam to you, O my father. And this rubs Harun the wrong way. Harun says, Musa, what's the difference between you and I? We're cousins. We have the same relationship to Rasulullah as you have. Why do you then go and force a differentiation between me and you? Imam Musa al-Kadhim says to him, okay Harun, let's imagine that Rasulullah was alive today. And if the Prophet was alive today and he said, oh Harun, give me your daughter in marriage, what would you say? Harun says, I would be pleased. I would be happy. I would be honored that Rasulullah would marry a daughter, one of my daughters. And Imam Musa ibn Ja'far says, Harun, this is where you and I are different. Because Rasulullah could never say such a thing to me because my daughter would be the daughter of Rasulullah and there would be no way for him to marry into this lineage. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In this way, the proof that Imam Musa ibn Ja'far would present would be so flawless and perfect that it would immediately differentiate and break all of the false claims that Harun was trying to make. No difference. We're all related to Rasulullah. And here Imam Musa ibn Ja'far would break his stance. Harun would try to force the Imam into having debates. And there's a book called Musnad ibn Musa ibn Ja'far, or Musnad ibn Musa al-Kadhim. And it talks about all the debates that Imam Musa ibn Ja'far had with different religions and ideologies that were forced upon him to try and disprove his status and reduce his status in front of the Khalifa. It was these attributes that forced Harun to look for a way that how do I end the life of this man? And eventually what he did was he sent a letter to his governor of the city of Medina and he said, find me a wasila to end the role of this Musa ibn Ja'far, to remove this thorn from my side. The governor of Medina looked through the people of Medina and found one of the relatives, Ali ibn Ismail ibn Ja'far, who was from the children of Hazrat Abbas or from the children of Imam Hassan. And the governor says to this Ali ibn Ismail, he says, I can promise you great wealth, but you need to give us information that would allow us to imprison this Musa ibn Ja'far. Ali ibn Ismail says, no problem, I'll do it. And he intends to leave the city of Medina to go and spy for the Khalifa against Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. The actions of Imam Al-Kadhim give us an important lesson here. Before this Ali ibn Ismail leaves the city of Medina, Imam Musa Al-Kadhim calls him to him. And he says, Ali, come visit me. When Ali comes to visit him, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far says, where are you going? He says, I'm intending to take a trip to Baghdad. Imam Al-Kadhim says, why do you need to go? Ali replies, he says, I have debts I need to pay. I need to make some income, so I will travel to make money. Imam Musa ibn Ja'far says, I will pay your debts. I will give you the money that you need. Don't go. Ali says, no, I have to go. Imam Al-Kadhim says, if you insist on going, still I will pay your debts. And the Imam gives him a large amount of money, where in some narrations, I believe it says 3,000 dinars or 300 dinars of gold and 40,000 dirhams of silver. And he gives this to Ali and says, Ali, don't go, stay. And Ali takes this wealth and says, I have to go. As soon as he leaves, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far says, this cousin of mine will be responsible for the spilling of my blood. All the companions of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far say, Ya ibn Rasulullah, you're telling us he's going to kill you and you're giving him money. You're giving him wealth. Why would you do that? And Imam Al-Kadhim explains and he says, our job is to keep the relations connected and invite towards hidayah and guidance, even if someone wants to break it from us. This attribute of keeping family relations and the importance of keeping relations even when the other person doesn't deserve it was not something new. It was something the Ahlul Bayt had been doing from the very beginning. When you look at even the life of Imam Sadiq, at the time of Imam Sadiq's shahadat, he says in his wasiyah, give 40 dinars or 70 dinars of gold to so-and-so relative of mine. That relative of Imam Sadiq is the one who raised the knife on Imam Sadiq and tried to assassinate Imam Sadiq. To where the companions again said, Ya ibn Rasulullah, this man tried to kill you and you're giving him money? And the Imam would reply, it is my job to keep the relations that Allah has joined connected. Even if they try to break it, I will not be the one to break it. Both of these attributes that the Ayyimah alayhimus salam are representing is an explanation for us of the importance of silatul rahim. Most often what happens, if someone wants to break relations with me, we say, fine, he's breaking relations, I'm not. And we say, let him break relations. If he wants to come back, he can come back, but I won't go to him. The Imam is teaching that that's not enough. That even if the other person wants to break relations with you, wants to break connections with you, you keep advancing towards them and keep inviting them to hidayah and goodness. This Ali ibn Ismail, Imam gives him wealth, but Ali ibn Ismail proceeds to the city of Baghdad. He sits in the court of the Khalifa, where all of the others are present, and he tells a falsification. He says, this Musa ibn Ja'far is raising an army against you, Khalifa. He is planning to attack you and cause revolt in the religion of Islam. And the Khalifa Harun says, how can you prove this? Ali ibn Ismail says, I have seen him with my own eyes, where he wanted to purchase some land. And the person said that the cost of this will be 30,000 dinars of gold. Musa ibn Ja'far immediately presented 30,000 dinars of gold. The seller turned and said, no, I don't want dinars made from here, I want dinars of a different place. Imam Musa ibn Ja'far produced 30,000 dinars of gold in foreign currency and presented it. This was enough of a lie for the Khalifa to believe that the Imam had intentions of raising armies against him and had saved an amount of wealth from outside to come with foreigners to attack the Khalifa. And he turned to his companions and he says, now that you have seen that this Musa ibn Ja'far is collecting wealth and will be raising an army against me, do you give me permission? And the entire court agreed and said that if there is someone like this, then he is worthy of being imprisoned and he is an enemy of the state. Harun, for appreciation, turns to this Ali ibn Ismail and he says, thank you very much. I will reward you with 400,000 dirhams of silver. Go and I'll send you your wealth. They describe and say that this Ali leaves the court of Harun and goes and stays in the city of Baghdad for a few days while the money is collected to be brought to him. And when the money finally comes to the door, they knock on the door and they say, oh Ali, we've brought your wealth. Ali is suffering from dysentery where his insides, his stomach has come out of his body and he's in the moments and throes of death. And he says, what good is this money when I am dying in this moment? The reaction of this is from the other side of talking about what is the impact of Sila Rahim. When we break family relations with someone, it reduces our wealth, it reduces our status, and it reduces the length of our life. Which is why it's very dangerous. Don't be someone who breaks relations with your family. That breaking of relations, Allah causes us to have consequences in every attribute of our life. If today you have a problem with your rizq, that your wealth isn't coming in, if you have a problem with your health, if you have a problem with your children, with your parents, with someone in your family, go look and see, is there a relation that I've broken? Is there someone in my family I've cut off? Is there someone I'm not connecting to? And it may very well be the cause of these difficulties. Ali dies without ever receiving the $400,000 that he gave, or 400,000 dinars that he was to receive for cutting off the relationship with the Imam. The consequence of this is that Harun comes to the city of Medina and he arrests Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. And he does it in a very clever way. He comes in the middle of the night, he arrests the Imam, and he puts him on the back of a camel in an enclosed saddle that you can't see who's inside. He prepares 2 of these and he sends them out of Medina into 2 different directions because he says if the people revolt, they won't know which way to go. He initially sends this Imam to the city of Basra and makes him a prisoner there. Imam Musa Al-Kadhim spends the year of 79 after Hijrah in prison in the city of Basra. At the end of that year, Harun messages the jailer and he says, poison him and kill him. And the jailer replies, I have not seen anything but goodness from this man. I will not be responsible for his murder. The jailer replies and he says, I have seen this man that when he prays, he never prays against you, though you are the one who put him in prison. I have heard his dua and I hear him pray to Allah that, oh Allah, I prayed for a time in my life where I would have no distractions except to worship you. And you blessed me with this time. And thank you for this time in my life. So the jailer says, either take him away from here or I will set him free. Harun moves Imam Al-Kadhim to the city of Baghdad, where the next 3 or 4 years until the year 83 after Hijrah, the Imam spends in prison. This is where we see some of the descriptions of the Imam's time in prison, where they describe and say that we would see Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, that after Salat al-Fajr, he would enter into state of sujood and would not move from his sajda until the time of dhuhr, where he would do his wudu and pray again. We had never seen someone so pious like this. Some of the du'as that we recite in our sujood are taught to us by Imam Musa ibn Ja'far from this exact condition. They tortured him in these prisons of Baghdad so much so that they said we eventually heard the dua of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far change to where he would say, oh Allah, thank you for giving me this time to worship you. Thank you for giving me the freedom to worship you. So, oh Allah, they have tortured me so much. I am asking you to end this time upon me. The prisons that they would hold the Imam in, they describe, would be at times a hole in the ground that would be covered, and the Imam would not be able to see when it was day and when it was night. He would try to look out from the cell and they would abuse the Imam, and he would say, I'm not trying to get out, I just want to see what is the time of Salat. They would keep him in iron chains that they describe and say the weight of was such that the Imam could not move freely when he wanted to. The first description of those prisons that were small and contained, the Imam could not stand up, could not lie down properly. These were the places where they would keep the Imam, to the extent where even the Shia became frustrated at the separation from the Imam. And after years of this imprisonment, they eventually came to him and they said, Yabna Rasulullah, when will you be free from this difficulty? When will we be in your company freely? The Imam said, in 3 days, come and see me on the bridge of Baghdad. They imagined that the Imam was giving news of his freedom and they would now be in the company of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. but the Imam was giving news of his shahadat and of his death. Within those few days, Mal'un Sindi ibn Shahiq presented a poison to the Imam and forced him to take it. Not only was the Imam alone in prison and poisoned, but rather they said that in this condition, they would take Musa ibn Ja'far as he was dying, lay him in front of the judges and lay him in front of the doctors and say, look and bear witness that there is no wound on his body. We have done nothing to him, that he is dying of natural causes. To the extent where in one of the narrators he writes and he says, in this instance it was that the Imam wanted to raise his voice and call out of that his condition as that of poison. They began to strike the Imam to prevent him from speaking in front of these people. They describe and say that the Imam alone in this prison, eventually the sweat of death overcame his brow. Eventually his breathing became shallow. His eyes began to close. The pain of death caused his hands and feet to move until eventually alone in the prison, still wearing the chains of a prisoner, my Imam's soul left his body and he became shaheed alone. They took my Madloom Imam. 4 servants lifted his body, not the family, not the dignitary, and carried him as a servant is carried, and placed his body out on the bridge of Baghdad, and called out, Hada Imam al-Rafida. This is the Imam of the rejectors. If you want to see, then see. We have not killed him, he has died of his own causes. They describe that for a period of time, the body of the Imam lay on the bridge. People would come and look, but no one would respond. Until eventually an old woman, seeing this personality, realizing this is the son of Zahra, whose body has been left on this location, began to frantically wander through the streets, calling, is there no one to help me? Is there no one to lift this body? One of the relatives and cousins of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far comes to this old woman. Oh, old woman, I see you worried as if your own son has died. She replies and says, Hasha lillah, if my son should die, that I am alive to bury him. He says, then why do I see you worried? She says, the son of Zahra's body lays on the bridge, and there is no one to support him. The cousin of Imam Sadiq comes. Cousin of Imam Al-Kadhim comes, collects the body, and goes to bury the body of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. Such was the case of the son of Zahra. But I tell you that we may weep over Imam Musa Al-Kadhim today. But Imam Radha taught us, Yabna al-Shabib, in kunta bakiyan fabqi lil-Hussain. It is true that Imam Musa Ja'far was kept on the bridge or kept out of a grave for 3 days. But it was the body of Hussain that was left under the heat of the sun of Karbala. And without a ghusl, without a kafan in that location. Not just that, remember that when Imam Zainul Abidin came to bury his father, they describe and say that he said to the Banu Asad, you will bury the rest of the shuhada. My father, I will bury myself. They describe and say when Imam Zainul Abidin came to lift the body of his father, he would lift from one side, the body would crumble from the other side. He would lift from the other side, the body would crumble again. My Imam was so madloom. They had trampled his body with horses so much that Imam Zainul Abidin could not lift the body of his father. Eventually he would call out, Ala Banu Asad, do you not have some cloth, some leaves, a mat that I may gather the pieces of my father's chest to bury him? Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawm al-zalimin. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. Tears in our eyes, we raise our hands in dua. ندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. 10 times we call out, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Mahmud بحق محمد يا أعلى بحق علي يا فاطر السماوات بحق فاطمة يا محسن بحق الحسن يا قديم الأحسان بحق الحسين. Oh Allah, give the thawab of this majlis to the marhumin of tonight's sponsors, our marhumin, and all the mu'mineen who are in need of dua. Ya Allah, by the wasila of Babul Hawaij, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, we have gathered here with hajat. Fulfill all of our hajat. Ya Allah, by the wasila of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, forgive all of our sins and cover all of our flaws. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Ya Allah, there are those amongst our families, our communities, the mu'mineen who are suffering through sickness and disease. Give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Ya Allah, those who are suffering through strife and insecurity wherever they may be in this world, give aman to the mu'mineen, Muslimin wherever they are. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahibul Zaman. Make us and our families from the supporters of our Imam. Ya Allah, give us the tawfiq of the ziyarat of Imam Al-Kadhim in this world and the shifa of Imam Al-Kadhim in the hereafter. One surah Fatiha, 3 times surah Ikhlas, li'arwah al-mu'mineen wal-mu'minat, with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
We'll do a few minutes azadari, and then after that we'll have dinner, inshallah.
برای سلامتی آقا امام زمان صلوات بلندتر. شد کشته زهر الله موسی بن جعفر یاگو شد کشته الله موسی بن جعفر یاگو از ظلم یارون الله از ظلم یارون الله آرون کافر یاگو شد کشته زهر الله شد سبن جعفر یاگو در کنج زندان الله در کنج زندان الله مثل غریبان یاگو زنجیر و در پای الله بخشت و غم سر یاگو شد کشته زهر الله موسی شد کشته نه جعفر یاگو این چارم حمال الله این چارم حمال الله با دیده تریاگو گفتند و هر یک الله با دیده تریاگو شد کشته زهر الله موسی بن جعفر یاگو شد نشش غریب است الله نشش غریب است الله هم به نصیب است یاگو نام گرامیش الله نام گرامیش الله موسی بن جعفر یاگو شد کشته زهر الله شد کشته
فریادو پایش بکندن الله پایش بکندن الله زنجیر در پایگو جسم مبارک الله جسم مبارک الله با تخت پاره یارو شد کشته زهرا الله موسی بن شد کشته سبن یانگون در کنج زندان الله در کنج زندان الله می گفت و جدش یاگو غریبی مادر الله غریبی مادر الله موسی بن جعفر یاگو شد کشته زهرا الله موسی بن جعفر یاگو شد کشته موسی بن برای سلامتی آقا امام زمان صلوات.
توجه زیاره. السلام علیک یا رسول الله.